Welcome, Postmedia's Ottawa Senators panel. I'm Ken Warren with Bruce Garriock, and special guest this week, Chris Phillips. Chris, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
Lots to talk about here. I mean, you got a big celebration coming up of your career in a month or so. Brought you in. I mean, a lot of legend really in the history of the Ottawa Senators. Retirement of your jersey. I mean, what's going through your mind at this point?
Well, it was obviously an honor to be recognized by the honoring committee to put my number up in the rafters, and quite honestly, it's it's almost surreal right now, kind of thinking about it. But I know once it's up there, and just I guess the legacy of that always being up there and going to games with my kids, or for them to go and to see that up there is just it's really hard to find the words to describe how special that's going to be.
You must have thought a lot about it. What did it mean to you, Chris, to be able to get drafted here in 1996 in St. Louis, and then spend your whole career here? Because in this day and age, a lot of players don't do that anymore. There's a lot of movement in the National Hockey League, and even in your era, there was a lot of movement in the NHL. To have that opportunity to finish your career here must mean a lot to you.
Yeah, it really does. Both from the hockey standpoint of being on one team my entire career. Is certainly is very special. There's a lot of pride that goes along with that. To be a Senator for life. Off the ice. With my wife being from here, raising the kids here. The charity stuff that we were able to get involved with. Because of the people that we met, relationships that we made from being here the entire time. I couldn't have really scripted it any better. I mean, you don't expect that, getting drafted to even play as long as I did, and be let alone all with one team. And it's nice to be recognized. I know that my career had some big moments, but really for the most part, kind of a journeyman guy, and so in that aspect of having that loyalty to the team and vice versa, and just going out and working hard, I'm obviously very proud of that, but to be recognized with my jersey being retired really puts the feather in the cap for that.
You talk about you're self-deprecating saying journeyman, but I mean you play 1,179 games, and I was looking through it, 114 playoff games, and what's happened in the last 10 years obviously with rebuilds and this and that. We took it for granted in this community for a long time that the Senators were going to be a playoff team and an elite team. So you had that run of 10, 11, 12, 13 years where the Ottawa Senators were going to be in the playoffs. They were, you had a couple of really good deep runs. But the playoff side of it, I think people, like I said, I think they kind of took it for granted. I mean, you think back about those playoff years and being part of some really, really good teams. What are the best memories for you through that?
Yeah, you're right. I was a part of some amazing teams. Right from the get-go, my first year, we are the 8th seed and beat Jersey, the top seed, in my first playoff experience, and that was one of my highlights. When I look back, and when Igor Kravchuk scored that empty net goal, I still would argue that might be the loudest I've ever heard the building. And we all went downtown for dinner after, and the 417 was like a parade route. There was people hanging out of the windows, and horns honking and screaming, and it was like, I would think, comparable to if any other city won the Stanley Cup. We won our first playoff series. It was just an incredible experience, and we had some letdowns in the playoffs where we had high expectations, but nonetheless they were on great teams that we had for the most part, success, all year round. There were some really good years. 03, being one goal away from going to the Stanley Cup final. That would have been a great chance to win the Cup that year when they kind of, beat Anaheim. New Jersey beat Anaheim, somewhat easily.
Right. Yeah.
05 after the lockout, we were destroying teams. That was kind of the year they had changed the rules, and Alfie and Havlat and Heater and Spez. I mean, we're getting 3-4 points a game. It seemed like there was a lot of pizza, and and then Dom Hassett got hurt at the Olympics. And that really hurt that year's chances of I think a great opportunity to go to the Cup. Obviously, Game 7 or 07 and getting there. We just throw in a President's Trophy, in there that, I don't know if spoiled is the right word, but we had some, great years that were, just a lot of fun to be a part of.
Because you mentioned it, 03, and that goal you scored in Game 6 in New Jersey to force that dramatic Game 7 on the Friday night here in Ottawa. Do you think that's the biggest goal you scored in your career? Do you look at that now? And I mean, it was one of the greatest celebrations. but do you think that that's one of the biggest goals you ever scored in your career?
Yeah, I think for sure it was. I think I only scored 71 of them, but
there were 71 great celebrations.
Yeah. But that was definitely at the top of the list. You when you grow up playing the game and playing street hockey, I mean, you dream of scoring Game 7 overtime. I mean, it was Game 6, but how it was that close to being a goal that you dream about, and how you would score it and how you celebrate it. And certainly that wasn't the the picture perfect goal coming in late. I still don't know how that puck was still laying there for a defenseman to get a rebound, but it was, and I took advantage of it, and it was certainly a highlight of mine. And the whole backstory of that playoff run and trying to win it for Raj after his big speech before Game 5, and it was an emotional time, and to have a big factor in on pushing that one more game further was huge.
I think the late great Brian Murray said nobody enjoyed scoring goals as much as you did. With the celebrations, and I a lot of the, where did that come from? I guess that's just emotion when in those moments.
Yeah, that one was for sure. I didn't know what to do. I was just so excited. The one arm salute sort of celebration came from a couple of the equipment trainers. Where I think I'd done it once, and they're like, that's got to be your thing. You got to do that all the time, and started doing it. So it's pretty funny for a defensive defenseman, I guess, to be recognized for a goal scoring celebration. But I'll take it.
When you think about one of the things that Roger had said to you guys was that second chances don't come along very often, right? That was the impetus of his speech before that game, wasn't it? When in that series.
Yeah, pretty much. Obviously we knew what he was going through. He knew what he was going through. It was, sort of parallel life and hockey, that, to make the most of your opportunities. He'd been in the game, seemingly forever for him, right from being a teenager, and, up until, the day he passed, he was in hockey, and never won a Stanley Cup. You never know when that second chance is going to come, and to put that in his, like I said, parallel of life, and just making the most of your opportunities. You never know when it's going to end.
When you think back at some of the guys you played with here in Ottawa, I mean, are there favorites? Maybe that's not fair to call it favorites, but guys that you really cherished, and you think back of the guys in that room. I mean, you think of the talent, Alfredson and Fisher and Spezza. You mentioned Hossa, Havlat. I mean, there's just, you can go on and on about the talent here. I mean, there's some guys that stand out maybe talent-wise or humor-wise, guys that made the experience so much better?
Yeah, I mean, that's when I look back, that is the best thing about the game, is the friends that you meet, the camaraderie that you have with those guys, and you look at to when, I came in, Reds was already here. I lived with him my first year. We had played World Juniors together. We already had a bit of a history there, and Alfie. A couple years older than us, but really in the same boat of life, and our kids being able to grow up together, right. While we played together, and then like you said, you look at the talented guys that we played with, was endless. You can go on, especially during those really good years, that core group of guys that we had for so long, but. Also just the guys that were around when I came in, and the Lance Pitlicks is one of the best guys that I had to make me feel comfortable and welcome and a part of everything, and the fun that we had with him as well, and how we kept it light. Denny Viel, that has the best laugh in all of hockey still to this day. Randy Cunningworth, that was my first training camp, and I stayed my first exhibition game in Hartford, and just those veteran guys that Jason York, Sean McEachran, that were around when I first started. Igor Kravchuk, my first partner. Not all necessarily household names, but guys that were important to me developing and learning how to be a pro.
Well, one of the things I've always wanted to ask you is that what did you have to go through to play the franchise record game of 1179? Because that's when the injury had I think your back injury, right? That's when it had it had been a difficult season for you. And what did you have to go through to get yourself into that game and to play it?
How far back do you want me to go?
Really? Yeah.
Not necessarily for my back, but looking back, that's one of my, I guess, most. I take the most pride in the fact of, and everyone's done it, but going out and playing with a dislocated finger and bandaging it up, and I taped my stick up so thick that it's because I couldn't bend my finger just to be able to hold on to my stick, that we would laugh about with the trainers. I went through some terrible feet problems, and freezing my feet and cutting them open right before warm up, and having stitches. Actually, having stitches felt better than relieving the pressure that was in them. 5 minutes before, and barely walking into the rink, and then getting frozen and doing jumping jacks after, and the amount of times, I guess, that you just played where you weren't 100%,
right.
And the people watching in the rink or at home had no idea, right? So there was no excuses. It was go out and just, you had to fight through it and play the best you can. And early on, if a coach said, can you play? It wasn't, well, I'm not 100%. It was, well, yeah, I can play. And you got out there and played the best you could. And I was really proud of that. And at the end, kind of in and out of the lineup a little bit. Played a lot early on, played a lot of minutes with Eric. Yeah. And as much as every player wants to play as much as possible and be put in every situation, that might have been sort of the downfall of being, that age and playing that much. But, who's going to say, I'm playing too much. I don't want to, that's just not in the DNA. I would have never made it to there in the first place. And then sort of as, playing games, getting closer to that number. Dave Cameron talked to me one morning skate and kind of laid out the next week of playing, I think it was 3 games in a row, resting, I think, in Jersey, and then to come home and break the record. And obviously thankful just to get there and have that opportunity. But banged up and sore, but not really thinking too much of it until I actually broke the record and said, you know what, I could use some time off after.
Right.
And with time off, it got worse and worse, where then it was like something's going on here. We got to figure this out. And had a pile of different procedures and epidurals and this and that led to surgery, which actually went really well. And then in my rehab of the surgery, I did something and kind of blew out where the surgery was and had a minor crack, and then that was the end of it.
I just before we wrap up here, Bruce, I just maybe you're still associated with the team and doing a lot of community involvement with them. Just the state of the team and the rebuild they're going on, and you obviously have lived through, like we said, when you came in, it was Senators had to establish themselves in the league. I mean, do you know what these players are going through and patience and all that sort of thing? What's your sort of opinion of what's going on now and advice to fans or to the players and how to get through this?
Yeah, I think where they are is very similar to where I was when I first started. When I first came here, Marian Hossa was a draft pick. Wade Redden was his first year under his belt. Being drafted by the Islanders and traded. Alfie obviously won the Calder, but really coming in his own. He had Daggy and Yash and some big stars there, but a lot of us and at that point, like not finishing high, but getting into the playoffs. But they drafted well, and nobody knew who Martin Havlat was, who Mike Fisher was, Chris Neal, Jason Spezza, Anton Volchenkov. Trying to think of all the names, but all these guys who really became household names. Trading for Zdeno Chara, bringing in Danny Heatley later on. Yeah. But nobody knew who these guys were. They were just draft picks. And they drafted well, and those guys, were impactful, obviously on the team and the success that we had for so many years. And I see them, that's where they are right now. I mean, they got some great guys playing down in Belleville. They got some really good players here in, I'll say the young leaders with, Kachuk and White and Shabbat. And not only are they, talented players, but you can see the character that they have. They're out in the community, they're doing things, they're everything that, we were taught and, how to be players in the NHL. And I see that happening right now, and they're exciting to watch, and they got some great leadership with, some of the older guys that are there now, and Pajot and Anderson. They've been here for a while, and I'm really excited about this team and the direction that they're going. It's hard to just keep saying patience because, it's been a couple of tough years, but, I'm very optimistic about the near future for this team.
Well, congratulations on a great career, Chris, and congratulations on having your number retired, because I think people know what you mean to this community and what you've done in this community and the mark you've made here. So I think it's a nice honor that you'll be joined by your family.
Thanks very much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
That wraps up this week's edition. Post Media's Ottawa Senators panel. Thank you.